I've seen men face a Mack truck all by themselves, little old men, because they were pumped by a woman. Solomon must have had a tremendous inferiority complex, insecurity problem, because he had to have 700 wives and 300 concubines, 300 mistresses to pump and stroke his ego on a daily basis. And you know what happened, folks? They led him away from his God. Led him away from his God just like a sheep going to the slaughter. Solomon had given up control of his own life in serving God and given it to the women. Older men, younger men, don't be like Solomon and give it up to the women. Because you know something? If a woman can pump you up, she can pump you back down. Okay? After telling you what a great king you are, she can say you ain't worth a quarter. And you'll feel like you ain't worth a quarter. Because you believed her first testimony, you'll believe the second one. Talking about be ye men. I want to hurry along to the third one. And for him, let's turn to John chapter 1, verse 1. That third one is none other than Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God. Every message I preach, I like to talk about my Christ. But as we're turning to Christ, I want to say something about the black man. This is something that I don't like to talk about because I'm embarrassed, frankly. Something that I hate for anybody of another race or nationality to hear. I even hate to tell my kids about it. But let's face it, if there is a crisis in the families in the world or in this country, the crisis is greatest among black families. You see, first of all, folks, let's understand this, that the number one cause of death for black males between 14 and 44 is homicide. Is homicide. Can you imagine that? The third leading cause of death for black males is suicide. Okay? Homicide and suicide. The number one cause of deaths for, let me take this back, okay? 45% of all homicide victims in this country are black. And we only represent 11.5% of the population, which simply means that we are on our way out. Okay? Where did it all start? I love history, folks. I love to study patterns of thought and how it all began. When we go back to slavery, you see, when we go back to Jamestown, Virginia, 1620, the first blacks who came over were indentured servants. But later on, when the cotton boom started in the cotton belt, part of the South, Southeast and South, we find that these indentured servants became plain old slaves. They lost their dignity. They lost their self-worth. They lost their masculinity. They were boys on the plantation all day long, totally domesticated by another man. In front of their families, they were domesticated. And when they came home to their wives and said, honey, I'm home, she would look at him and say, you've been a boy all day. And so you're still a boy. The black woman was never domesticated. Not like the black man. White women were domesticated. And that's why they lead women's lib movement. Black women manipulated their ways into the master's house in many cases. They would tutor the master's children, iron the clothes, all those kinds of things. They learned to read and write. The men did not. And so the man, no respect at home, no respect on the plantation drove him to the arms of a younger woman who would say, "Big Daddy." And as a result, the black woman reared her young daughters with the resentment, the anger, and the pain of losing her black man to another woman. And so she reared her young daughters, not purposely, but incidentally. She transferred her anger, her resentment into her daughters. And so her daughters were raised with their fists balled up against black men. You know what I'm talking about, folks? The next thing that happened is the young males in that family were raised to feel like nothing because all of the women looked to men as nothing. If he's a man, he's a dog if he's a man. Okay? Okay? Remember years ago on People Are Funny, there was a little boy, you know, Art Linkletter would ask the question, "What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up?" And this young boy said, "I want to be a white man." And Art Linkletter said, "Why would you say that, young man?" He said, "Because my mama said, ain't." Okay? And folks, that's horrifying. But now, this young man was reared believing that black males are nothing. And do you know what was going to happen, folks? As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, right? If you believe you're nothing and nobody, you're going to grow up as nothing and nobody, right? And if you look at our entire drug culture, drugs is not the problem. It's low self-image, insecurity. That's the problem. Drugs is the bad solution to that problem. Let's take it a step further. The first black church was started in Philadelphia, Methodist AME. Don't want to go into a lot of details, but it started in 1792. First black church. He experienced some prejudice among the Methodists in his city, and so white Methodist ministers, Francis Ashbury, Thomas Coke, Methodist ministers got together and built the building and put the salary together and opened up the church. Sounds familiar? They owned the church building, or that is, the only name on the church building was the preacher. His salary came from the white brethren. Therefore, the black brethren could not hire nor fire. And no matter how he lived or what he did, they could not move him. It was his church. Okay? The preacher was the counselor. He was the one who could read. He was the one, and he's still the one. Whenever politicians want to be elected in the black community, they call the black community leaders the black preachers. They never call the Chinese preachers. They never call the Jewish preachers. They never call white preachers. Only the black preachers. And in the denominational world, as well as in many churches of Christ, the preacher is the boss. He is another person who emasculates the men. So let's look at it. Black man comes home, no respect. He goes to work, no respect. He comes to the church to worship, no respect. Only comfort zone for the black man is the streets. That's when they tell him, "Man, you knocked that guy crazy, didn't you? Man, you're the baddest guy I ever seen in my life. Man, look at Joe over there. He can drink more whiskey than I ever seen anybody."